Namaskar. Welcome to the Saraswati Sangam project panel discussion series. Today's panel discussion is on the topic of rejecting caste and reclaiming the Varna-Jati-Kula parampara or tradition. Thank you for joining us for yet another panel discussion of the Saraswati Sangam project. Today's topic is a very important and very compelling topic to me on rejecting the caste system and reclaiming the Varna-Jati-Kula parampara tradition of Bharat. This seems to be a very important topic, pretty globally speaking, because in India it has had various ramifications pre and post independence of the country, both social as well as very seriously political. And then in past decades, or I should say more recent decades, it started to have a very unfavorable, unpleasant undertones and very obvious playouts of how narratives are being built in this country and perhaps in other countries as well. That which is being built in this country is very obvious to us, and it's coming to us very painfully and very dangerously close to home in the US, where it's really nothing to be of any relevance. So in this group, what I'm hoping with the various backgrounds that all of us have and various angles with which we study our own background and traditions and practice it in life and engage in communities, I would like to create a collective view of what it is that we are dealing with and what it is that we need to work towards under this title of or theme or topic of panel discussion we have picked. So to get that started, the first thing obviously I want to hear is defining the two things that we have in the topic today. So what is caste system and what is the Varna-Jati-Kula parampara / tradition? So I'm going to put that question to Rudranath ji to kick us off on defining what it is that we are talking about.
All right. I'm not an expert. I'll say that up front. My knowledge is based off of reading other experts. The caste system, the word caste is a Portuguese term based on how you rank relative to color in their eyes. So if you are a darker color, you're a lower caste, and if you're a lighter color, you're a higher caste. Based off of that, the British primarily, but all European societies have developed their own caste system and then projected it on India and tried to force fit the Varna-Jati-Kula system into what is the caste system. We all belong to a jati. We are all born within a jati. That jati may be a jati that is maybe a cobbler's jati or maybe a jati of fishermen. And traditionally, we've kind of stayed within the jati because it involves learning skills from childhood and developing those skills and refining those skills. But there was no relationship between being born in one jati and not doing something else. I mean, ancient Hindu literature is rife with such examples. For example, if you read Bharat Gupta's works of Delhi University, Bharat Gupta has, in his exposition on Natya and Nritya, has shown that, Brahmins in what is quote unquote the ancient ages or the Middle Ages were working as business people and did what business people used to do in those days. for example, and it's well borne out in many um, um, works of literature of that time, Kalidasa included. So, caste is a term that has been imposed on Indian culture, but it is actually a Portuguese term adopted by all Europeans, and transpositioning that feudal structure onto an Indian structure which was far more open and fluid. So that is my understanding.
All right. Excellent. Excellent. Yogesh, you want to add something, a little bit more additional detail on, say, Varna-Jati-Kula or caste system? Obviously, I understand is a confusion of a attempt at creating some hierarchy in the society for whatever purpose. But Varna-Jati-Kula is really grounded in our own tradition. So, Yogesh, some more description of Varna-Jati-Kula from your view, understanding? You're on mute.
Sorry. Yeah, and I think just building upon what Rudranaji just said, uh, it's sort of an imposition of more of a European construct into Indian society and the structure, uh, which is basically them only having the ability to look at more as a binary thing. It's more like a social psychological construct from a European perspective versus an Indian one, which is multi-layered and far more nuanced and difficult for outsiders to really understand and comprehend. So that's where they sort of impose that coming into India in the middle period. Unfortunately, and that's where the battle is, it's not only that the Western world or outsiders understand it this way now about the structure of the society, it's Indians also which understand it the same way. So it has permeated down within Indian ethos as well to that extent, because it has become a political tool as well in last, say, 100 years plus. Um, it's, I guess, at this stage, we should be focusing on getting the awareness, because there's no, quick fix. There is no shortcut. It's going to be creating awareness, having a dialogue internally within our own like-minded people, as well as others, explaining what really that structure meant when it was envisaged. So if you remember going back to our other conversation a few months back, and I touched upon, it was primarily, actually, it was a far superior structure in terms of separation of duty and avoiding conflict of interest, which is so much of 20th and 21st century paradigm as the West understands. So talk to them in that language, how it was achieved, that separation of duty, and it created the harmony in the society as a balanced view. And there could be many examples. We can keep going on to it about saying, how it was not binding as by birth. It was a sort of a profession of choice, and everybody was free till, I guess, Europeans started putting a harder structure with the first time 1861 census actually recording it, and unfortunately from there onwards, uh, hardening the position in the society in that sense. So
Right, right. So few keywords that would stick would be the rigidity, the binary, and the imposition of something that was not natural to us. And then the keyword I would take away is the awareness, need for awareness. And of course, really going down to what it is that we truly adhere to in our own understanding of society, social fabric, and functioning, a good functioning society construct. So, and actually, I do know Bhudevji is doing some fundamental studies around this topic, and I'm sure we'll be able to build up on that in coming discussions and learning efforts. Moving on, Ravindraji, I want to ask you, of course, we now understand what it is we are talking about. So in terms of rejecting caste system, something that has so insidiously taken hold on our own understanding of ourselves, being used as a political weapon as well. What would you see as the urgency to reject the caste system? And of course, what you see as the challenges of attempting to do that, Ravindraji?
Yeah, Aparnaji, I think let's just pull in. I could not hear the complete question. Can you please repeat? Sorry.
Of course, of course. So I was asking, now that we understand the essence of what caste system is all about and how insidiously we have absorbed it and also been using it as a political weapon or tool, what is, in your view, the urgency to reject caste system, and what are the challenges to do so?
I think Aparnaji and everybody, maybe I'll talk in Hindi. So what we need to understand, again, the root cause, we need to understand how the caste system was propagated in Indian like context. So understand who basically propagated caste system. Did we see really caste system problem 1,000 years back, when India was doing very well before like Muslims and before British attack? Why it became such a big issue like later on? So more than understanding the more semantic part, what is given in the media, what is given in the history book, we need to understand the origin of the root cause. And it's very obvious. Everybody knows British exploited the caste system to divide Indian basically community further. Each and every city, in each every village in India used to be independent, distributed. We talk about distributed data architecture today. We had like a financial whole country economy running on the Sanatan Dharma like concept 1,000 years back. So caste system, see, again, we can twist the word the way they want, but it was, we have a beautiful example in our epic and in our like dharmas, like books, how the origin of Valmiki, origin of Sabri and all that. So people need to understand what was like a start, was it really a problem, who later on basically twisted and like used against us. That will give us much more clarity than trying to define what is there in the constitution, what are the equal right, and all these are very, I will say, at our level, we should always go to the root cause of the issue, and that will give a much better understanding. Problem is, narrating and giving the right message to common people is so difficult in such a short time. So that's the reason media and then policymaker and the intellectual have to play a key role. But you know, India is India, like the media is owned by a few group, institutions are owned by politicians. So yeah, I think anyway, our effort has to be more we can associate ourselves and then dig up at the root cause level, that give a clarity if this is really issue or if this was like a manufactured one.
Excellent. Yeah. So basically, if something is artificial and not indigenous, really trying to understand what is indigenous, and that is a lot of awareness building exercise, and challenges of that is not just specific to this, but actually very broad set of issues really require that awareness building engines, and maybe thousands and millions of them to enhance awareness. Monaji, if we are trying to go back to the roots, as Ravindraji mentioned, we need to understand what is it worthy in the roots of, say, Varna-Jati-Kula parampara, that is worthy of reclaiming. So from your perspective and understanding, what is it about the Varna-Jati-Kula parampara that is worth reclaiming?
I mean, there are doctors in this chat, and I think they can probably answer better than me, but I personally feel that it's I mean, just from the human biology point of view, I think it was a very smartly designed system. You don't, accidentally, marry too close to your, your cousin, or there were all those things described. I mean, even before, I mean, even though West claims that they have discovered DNA, and I mean, they may have looked at it first, but who knows what knowledge was lost in the past. So, but the point is that they understood that very well, and that whole system of Varna, Jati, and just to make sure that people understood what their origins were and where they were coming from, without imposing any restrictions on their in their normal life cycle. I mean, I think that was like a great system. And caste is obviously something completely foreign. I mean, like it's another Western template which has been imposed on in India. I mean, among other Western templates, I mean, which we have to get rid of. And I think starting point should be changing the textbooks. Nothing has been changed there. So, yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So, Varna-Jati-Kul, again, being indigenous and really having thousands of years of knowledge construct behind them is very foundationally, scientifically sound. And Monaji, that's what you're alluding to, in a biological underpinning. And the other aspect is that our knowledge of social structures has been very deep. And Varna Jati are really reflecting off that. Of course, this is something that we have, again, not been introduced or taught in our own educational system, so we don't know ourselves. So self-awareness is seriously lacking. And that was, again, something that needs more work, and maybe it actually needs more research. And again, in the theme of Saraswati Sangam project, the Sangam being of learning knowledge from a scientific angle of inquiry, critical thinking, really needs to be looked at from a social science perspective, political science perspective as well, because that's what Varna, Kul, and most importantly, Varna Jati are definitely social constructs, and Kul, as Monaji was saying, is a more biological. So, given that the emphasis here really needs to be to go into beginning to understand what the indigenous knowledge construct of thousands of years was, I do want to hear more of the mentors' inputs on what is our collective understanding and how do we promote that understanding. Because I think stating what caste system and the ills that has caused us and the danger that it poses to us is something we can discuss, but that's again focusing on the negative and rather than the positive. So Rudraji, circling back to you, how do we more deeply begin to understand our own indigenous knowledge construct around social sciences and the biological underpinning of social sciences that I'm trying to bring under the Varna-Jati-Kul understanding of our own parampara?
It's a great question and a very deep one, Aparnaji. How do we begin to understand? So, first of all, we as a community of Hindus have had no political power for a very, very long time. And still, the institutions that run our systems, we have no political say in them. So, in my opinion, the first step is to pressurize institutions within India, because since that is the biggest Hindu land, to develop these institutions. We have institutions that are completely designed to suppress our systems. The ICCR comes into mind. The Indian Council of Historical Research comes into mind. They are very well funded, and they basically fund trips to various Western universities and give lectures and have people come over and basically diss us all the time. So my approach would be to start at the political level and then make sure that our curriculum from the base curriculum from when we start our schooling, which unfortunately is still a British system, punishment included. But anyway, we have to start with political change, schooling change, research, and then understanding. You cannot get to an understanding. For example, we have got some great intellectuals on this forum. We have some great intellectuals outside this forum, example, Rajiv Malhotra and others, who will talk about Varna-Jati-Kula, but they are drops in the ocean. We really have to make a political change at the base level. And that is why I do what I do.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I'm going to turn this question to Shrikantji. I know Shrikantji feels very passionately about this topic of challenges of actually learning about ourselves, the self-awareness challenge. So Shrikantji, weigh in on the challenge as you see it.
Thank you, Aparnaji. So the challenge that the way I see it, I think it's primarily we need to ask ourselves, how can we win away people from their current mindset of thinking in terms of caste? I think the answer to that is fairly straightforward. Education reform, right? But I think it will be futile. It'll be an exercise in futility if we just wait for the education reform to happen. Because the education reform is a function of the political landscape. And the education reform also needs to happen not just at the federal level, but also at the state level. And we know how India functions at the state level. And it will require a fair amount of political willingness across board for these education reform to actually take place and manifest itself across the Indian education system. I think it's high time we also need to start thinking about addressing this challenge by involving civil society groups, the right-leaning civil society groups, and also at an individual level, and see how what they can do to create awareness amongst the youngsters today that they need to stop thinking along the caste system and need to start thinking about more along Jati Varna-Kula system. I think to make a real impact, we would need an army of such people, but I think that should not deter us at the individual level from making the necessary effort. Even if it is a drop in the ocean, I think just depending on the government to bring about the reform is going to be an exercise in futility. We as individuals and as members of right-leaning civil society groups need to jump into the fray.
I agree, and every little bit counts. And I'm seeing on the chat that some of the mentees who joined slightly later are also looking to weigh in. I will open up for open discussion in a little bit. Still working on the prepared questions and discussions from the panelists. In last set of questions, essentially in understanding what the lay of the land and challenges of reclaiming our own indigenous, social, and biologically grounded system may be, where we are stuck, and to Shrikantji's point about what it will take to actually come out of getting unstuck, is to also understand the perils of remaining stuck. As I started off today's discussion, I was highlighting the damage that the caste system construct has done pre-independence and post-independence in political toolism or weaponism. That weapon has come close to home even in countries like United States. So the perils is something I want to spell out in this discussion so that we end in in our prepared discussion in the scope of this conversation, in both where we should be and where we are, and if we stay where we are, what that might mean in our next 10 years and next generation, for kids in next generation and beyond. Monaji, I'm going to ask you again, as a parent of teenagers, what do you see from your perspective as the perils of not addressing this challenge of who we really are and what we really need to know about ourselves, and getting stuck in this very painful imposed caste construct?
Well, it's the same thing that we've all been collectively experiencing: low self-esteem, and we always think we are all, to a certain degree, have that inferiority complex about being Hindus, and being sorry for our culture when the opposite should be true. And I think even today, I mean, like when I read their history books, and the first chapter begins with Hindus is like caste system, and randomly starting with the birth time of Buddha, which they again get everything wrong, and everything is like templated to a Western system. Like from their point of view, history cannot begin before, I don't know, 3000 BC or something, and then they just extrapolate everything and force fit everything into that, including our own indigenous belief structure. It's not, I wouldn't call it a belief, it's more like a lifestyle structure, या हमारा धर्म अपने अपने उसमें वो उसको फोर्स फिट करते हुए आते हैं. तो I mean, you at every single point of time, you start feeling sorry. I mean, if you are a child in America reading that about your culture, it just feels bad. I mean, it's the same way I felt bad when I was in India and I was like, भागो यहाँ से छोड़ के. which is bad, because it that's a feeling that it used to inspire, and if you're able to run away, you run away. But if you are taught in a different way, and I'm sure if I had been taught in a different way, I would not have. So that is where I think is the main problem. Like we keep having this generation after generation of Hindus who have inferiority complex, or who think they're just good for work. They're just good workers. They're not leaders, and they're not thought leaders, and they can't lead the world. So,
which is exactly to the contrary. Yogesh ji, your thoughts, and I'll request Ravindra ji to wrap up the panel, and then we'll open up for open discussion. Yogesh ji.
As I said, it's not a short-term thing. It is more, as more and more people talk about it, engage and create awareness in what it really meant. But it also, we should not shy away from saying this, that of course, some bad habits crept in over hundreds of years in our own society. So if you look back, I mean, Gandhiji said, Harijan coined the word Harijan. Why did he have to coin that word? Why did he have to go and start saying about Chhuachut, Hatao? Because that is the ground reality, unfortunately, over hundreds of years within our own society. Now, is it crumbling? Maybe it is crumbling. Is it still pervasive? I think it is still pervasive. So my point being, whatever we talk, it's going to be a very slow, painful, gradual process. What is compounding the problem, and in an ideal world, it should not have been the case, that it's a democracy, and this topic of caste has become a political instrument. So much so, if you look at how many, I mean, I have been following news items for, since forever, since early 80s. How many times did we read these candidates belong to Thakur, Kurmi, this caste, that caste, and hence this is the. Why do we have to have that conversation? Should the politics of economics not be about upliftment purely on economic criteria of large society and not, well, a particular caste? Unfortunately, because that's a political instrument, which allows certain politicians to get into the power, it's further reinforced. And our media and our general commentary about it is simply reinforcing it. That battle has to happen where that should not really matter, uh, or diluted as a political instrument. I do not know there is a quick fix or there is a ready-made solution, because that's simply not the way our political system is structured at this point of time in India. Now, its ramifications outside, that's the commentary, right? Those politicians come out of India and speak in the same tone. So then suddenly the rest of the world only hears that. It does not talk about other good things. So
Mm.
what I'm trying to say is it's a long drawn battle. We are simply maybe just a drop, even not even a drop, but at least we can say, well, we are making an effort, whatever we can do.
I would take that again to the fundamental challenge of understanding our own fundamentals. So this whole topic of Chua-Chut is actually has a basis in Shauch. And Dr. Raj Vedam has done some research around Shauch. And the problem is, if you follow practices without understanding the meaning behind, purpose behind them, then it becomes basically a burden for the society. And so, if you understand Shauch, and then again, practices have to evolve as sanitation and cleanliness improves, your behavioral practices adopt to that. And our society has absolutely been very good at adopting, except that at some point we forgot our own knowledge because it was not being transmitted. So then this Chua-Chut came in, and then we are blaming ourselves for Chua-Chut and calling people Harijan and whatnot. I think it's a very complex issue, and the bottom line of it does come to the fact of, do we understand, know what we don't understand, and start beginning to understand what we need to understand. And to that, I also point, Ravindraji was pointing to some knowledge resources in the chat window, Rajiv Malhotraji's books. And there are other phenomenal researchers and people who are contributing. And we should all increase our reading and learning, and continuing to do so. And of course, to the youngsters. So I'm going to, with that, request Ravindraji to wrap up with closing remarks, and then I'll open up for open discussions. I know some of our mentees are very eager to weigh in.
Thank you, Aparnaji. I think this topic is very interesting and very relevant to what is happening in the current geopolitical world. And if you don't, if you are not aware about this issue, and this is getting translated into policies, this is going to hurt generation after generation. This will be a problem of like not just decade, but can be centuries problem. So I think what I would, as you said already, what is, we get influenced by others' opinion very easily because our root, we are trying to, we don't follow our root so strongly, we don't follow our practice. Even if somebody is saying, and if there might be a partial truth in their statement, let's say because of caste system, there was many issues, but we need to dig up the issue on our own. We need to have our own understanding before we accepting it. Sometimes we feel we will always give more importance to Western media, Western narrative. Why do we need to say again, the root cause is going to be inferiority complex and being like more risk averse, trying to save your own things. But problem is, if you continue that mentality for long, then you are damaging. So maybe in tactical terms, you can always, you don't need to voice your opinion, and you don't need to fight the crowd which are against, like where you are not going to make any difference. But then you need to understand how you don't need to deviate from the core issue, and how do you have to address that in the long run. So we need to go, the people who roots are stronger, who have like that analytical ability to understand and then reason out, don't get so easily biased. We need to cultivate, and all these things has to happen from the school days. We are seeing what kind of wokeism is happening today in even the US university, because the reason we know a lot of US universities are owned by the foreign power, deep state. So there are multiple angle, different things. So again, going back to, we just need to make sure our kids understand, future generation understands what are the real issue, how do we analyze the root cause, How do we differentiate? Nobody is perfect. Absoluteness and perfection is like a illusion. And then we also need to understand we have a capability and we have a power and we have like an intent to fix if something was done wrong in the past. But like criticizing your own peer, criticizing yourself, and like feeling inferior based on few small issues never like takes you in the long run. As long as we can go to the basic and have a confidence in our ability and our intention, we should be fine. We just need to practice and implement those more strongly. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I think that's a good way to summarize. I'm going to open up for general comments. And I know a couple of the mentees joined us late. So Aritra, I know you wanted to speak, put your point forward. So introduce yourself and then share what you have.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. And I am Aritra Ghosh Tustidar. I am basically Bengali by birth and follower of Hinduism by choice. So I think this should be the required credentials to speak on this topic. And I have made a beginning statement that is taken from Bhagavad Gita, which tells us that Chaturvarna Maya Sishta Guna Karma Vibhagasya. So it talks about the Chatur Varnas, but here we don't find the claims of birth or Janm as the basic viewpoint. The basic viewpoint here is the Guna and the Karma. So by the character, that is the Guna, and the Karma, that is the profession in which one is. So thereon we can find the basis of the caste or the Varna. I would use the word Varna preferably more because the word casta is being derived from a Portuguese word casta, and that does not really comprehend to very much to our Indic knowledge systems, because casta is something in the form of feudal sense. So I would prefer the word Varna to talk about these things. And when we talk about Varnas, we all know that there are basically 4 Varnas, but in our local administration systems of the Gram Panchayats, we can see that the head of the Panchayat was being told as the Sarpanch. So the word Panch includes 5 things, right? But we should be having 4. So the 4 things are Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Shudra. So what is the 5th one? So there we can have that the 5th one, or the 5th Varna, is the forest tribe. So who come from the one. And now I would be just integrating this into our most revered scripture, which is the Ramayana by Valmiki. And I would be referring many more Ramayanas, which is not of the Valmiki Ramayana, but from Tulsidas as well, where we could find many instances, as well as the Krittivashi Ramayana. So in the Valmiki Ramayana, we could see, as right now I have told, the 5th Varna was not one who was Achyut. So Achyuta is another form of Lord Vishnu as well, in the form of Krishna. Let's not get into those and stick on to our Ramayana thing. And when we are sticking onto the Ramayana, we could see easily that in the Valmiki Ramayana, we can find references of the Vanar Sena, where we can find the Vanara to be the warriors of our the clan of or the main soldiers of Sri Ram's team. So when we talk about Vanar, they are not basically bandar or monkeys. So when we talk about this Vanar word, the Sanskrit etymology says that it comes from 2 words, one and nar. So the one who is residing in one or forest. So the residents of one or forest are basically Vanar. Now we can find many references that in few instances they have been told as creeper, which corresponds to a monkey or hominids, other hominids of that point of time. That could be a scientific viewpoint. I am not going so far into the details.
I interject in saying that karma doesn't translate to profession. And I want to say that specifically in being careful in interpreting Sanskrit. And
absolutely, ma'am.
I'm very glad that Bhudev Ariji is with us. He's an actual learned Sanskrit scholar. And he and I have had a discussion a couple of weeks ago about getting into Sanskrit etymology to understand the various concepts and the words, even in the Varna-Jati-Kula. So we will work with him in the coming months, and I'm going to reach out to you as well for your inputs in collaborating, because that's what this group should do. Look at various
Absolutely, ma'am.
ways by which we feel passionate about topics, because our common cause is a very valid and compelling cause. So we will look to
Absolutely.
contribute. And I wanted to give Bhudev a chance to speak up a little bit. I know you have a lot to say, and I will look to have you say and build and work with us on your passion of this topic. But maybe एक दो आप कुछ अपने विचार शेयर करना चाहें तो भूदेव जी.
बिल्कुल. मैं इस विषय में 2-3 विषयों में से अवगत कराना चाहूंगा. एक तो भारतीय सनातन पद्धति को समझने के लिए हमें 3 चीजों को ध्यान देना होगा. एक तो काल को जानना होगा. दूसरा है कि जो आस्तिकता और बुद्धि की पवित्रता, इन तीनों चीज को अगर हम लेके चलते हैं तो वास्तव में हम किसी को समझा पाएंगे कि हाँ वास्तव में जो ब्राह्मण क्षत्रिय वैश्य वर्ण ये सब जो जाति है या नहीं है, या बनावटी है, वास्तव में रियल है, जिसके बिना आदमी चल ही नहीं सकता है, इत्यादि विचारों को वो वैज्ञानिक ढंग से वो समझ पाएगा. अन्यथा वो जैसे वर्तमान में अभी एक मानसिक दशा बनी हुई है कि कास्ट का मतलब होता है कि एक लोगों के द्वारा थोपी हुई व्यवस्था, जिसमें ऊंच नीच भावना हो, ये आदि मानव है तो ये बंदर है तो वो भील जाति का है, इत्यादि इत्यादि बातें जो करते हैं, वो सब केवल केवल संस्कृत भाषा को छोड़कर इतर जितने भी भाषा हैं उसमें एक शब्द अर्थ लेकर के वो चलते हैं, एक शब्द उसका एक ही अर्थ लेके चलते हैं. लेकिन संस्कृत भाषा में उनको ये नहीं पता होता है कि जाति शब्द का अर्थ क्या क्या होता है, वर्ण शब्द का अर्थ क्या क्या है, और यहाँ तक कि वंश है, कुल है, गोत्र है, इत्यादि जो भी शब्द अभी यहाँ पर चर्चा किए गए विद्वानों के द्वारा, वह एक अपने आप में बहुत वैज्ञानिक ढंग से मायने रखते हैं इस परंपरा को समझने के लिए. और इतने को समझने के लिए कम से कम उनको आस्तिकता होना पड़ेगा, उसके अंदर में आस्तिक बुद्धि होनी चाहिए, और वो भी पवित्र बुद्धि. आस्तिकता के अंतर्गत 6 चीजें आती है. एक तो ईश्वर आ जाता है, दूसरा आत्मा, प्रकृति, काल, दिशा और आकाश और वेद. इन 5 चीजों को व्यक्ति समझेगा तब वो कालखंड को समझ पाएगा. कालखंड को समझेगा तब वेदों के द्वारा जो व्यवस्थित है ये सामाजिक विज्ञान है अपने यहाँ जो अभी चर्चाएं की जा रही जिस टॉपिक को लेकर के, वो व्यक्ति भली भांति समझ पाएगा. अन्यथा हम अगर उनको कहें कि वर्ण जाति ब्राह्मण क्षत्रिय वैश्य को समझा दे तो वो शायद है कि पूर्ण रूप से न समझे, हो सकता है वो संतुष्ट भी न हो. इसीलिए जब हम जाति व्यवस्था को विचार करने चलते हैं तो एक शब्दों में उसे नहीं समझाया जा सकता. जैसे कोई कहे भाई विज्ञान को हमें समझा दो, फिजिक्स को हमें एक शब्दों में समझा दो, तो नहीं समझाया जा सकता. तो उसके लिए कम से कम काफी समय चाहिए, 2-4 घंटा उस विषय में गंभीरता से विचार करने के लिए. अच्छा, विचार हो जाए, यहीं तक रुकना नहीं है, उसमें प्रश्न उत्तर भी होना आवश्यक है. अगर आप जिज्ञासा नहीं रखेंगे तो हो सकता है आपके स्तर पर कोई दूसरा व्यक्ति पूछे जो कि एक तार्किक हो और हेतु पूर्वक आपके सामने प्रश्न रखे तो आप उसका उत्तर न दे पाए. तो इसलिए चर्चा के साथ साथ में हमें इन विषयों को अगर ध्यान देते हुए चलेंगे और अंत में अगर जिज्ञासा या बीच में रखते हुए चलेंगे तो शायद हम विषय को काफी लोगों तक पहुंचा पाएंगे, और वो भी सरलता से. जी, इतना ही रखना.
बिल्कुल सही बात. आप बहुत अच्छा लगा आपके विचार. दो मिनट ही बोले बट अच्छा लगा. और मैं आपसे पहले भी कह चुकी हूँ, हम आपके साथ काम करेंगे इस विषय पर, और शोध में, और मोस्ट इम्पोर्टेंटली डिसेमिनेशन में, प्रचार में. Thank you for tuning in. We greatly appreciate your support. Thank you.